All right, so next what we're going to need to do is add some photo textures, and this is going to really help it bring it into the realm of reality because we're taking textures from actual photographs of real life things and incorporating it into our picture, okay? So you can see I have brought up here this chameleon, and we're going to use, and I have a bunch of photos as well, I should mention, okay, that I've brought into Photoshop. So I am in Photoshop now. If you don't have Photoshop, it's going to be difficult to do this in Procreate because there's not a warp feature, but this is just kind of like a finishing touch. So we are here in Photoshop, and the first thing that we need to do, we're going to place this up here for a second, is get our lasso tool, and we're going to select an area here for the eye. So I'm going to use my lasso tool and circle this whole thing here. You know what? Let's try that again. I want to get a little bit wider area around the eye. All right. Then we can take our move tool and just bring this right in here. Okay, perfect. So now what we can do, we're going to go ahead and lower the opacity. We want to bring it down to about around 30 to 40%, somewhere in there. Okay. And you can see I just imported this whole thing as a Photoshop document. So I have my creature and my background layer, and those are the only two layers I have. So on top of this is where we're going to be doing our texture. So I have this. We can go ahead, let's zoom in on this right here so you can see what we're doing a little better. Okay, we're going to come up here to image, and we're going to go to adjustments and click on exposure. Okay, and we're going to adjust this. If we bring the gamma up, it'll increase our contrast a little bit more. Okay, and bring up the exposure a little bit. Oh, a little bit too far there. We just want it a little tiny bit. Okay. Bring the gamma down just a little bit more. All right, perfect. Okay, and then let's go ahead and get our warp tool. So if we come to image, where is it? Let's find it really quick. Actually, sorry, edit. I apologize. It's under edit, transform, and warp. Okay, this is going to allow us to move this around to get it to match what we already have here, okay? Which is what we want to do. We're going to keep it as a sphere like it is already, but we're just going to move this around till it looks about right. We don't want to warp it too much because it is supposed to still look like a sphere. Okay. And also on top of that, we can go ahead, let's go ahead and accept that. We're going to come to our adjustments and go to brightness and contrast. Or sorry, whoops. I'm going to go to adjustments and do hue and saturation, okay? And lower the saturation a little bit because we don't want it to adjust the colors we already put on. We just want it to interact with it, okay? So adjust that just a little bit, bring up the lightness just a little bit. Okay, and then we can lower the opacity a little bit more. You just want to adjust all these settings till it looks about right where you want it. Okay, so I'm bringing the saturation down, and then we're going to adjust the gamma one more time using the exposure. I'll bring that up a little bit just so our darks get a little bit darker in there. Okay, now we have all these kind of rough edges around it that we want to take care of. So all we have to do is come over to our eraser tool, and I have a soft brush selected, okay, and I'm just going around the edge here and cleaning up that hard edge so it looks nice and smooth. Okay, perfect. So now when we zoom out, you can see what that looks like. And it looks pretty good. Okay, now you're gonna need to do that all over the entire thing. So let's look at some other areas that we want to add texture to. So let's go with this here really quick. We're gonna get our lasso tool, take a big section here and we'll drag that over. Okay. Go ahead and drop it in. Perfect. So same process. We're going to lower the opacity. Okay. We're going to come up to adjustments, exposure. We're going to bring the gamma up and the exposure up just a little bit. Not too much. Okay, and then let's get our warp tool. So under edit, transform, warp. And this is going to be for his neck. Now we're warping this so that it will sort of fit and follow the wrinkles and folds that we've already put into the skin, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish here, okay? And so we're wanting this to look like it's part of it. It's not just sitting on top, right? Because if it just looks like it's sitting on top, it's not really going to make a lot of sense, and it's going to kind of look weird, right? Which is why we have to do this in Photoshop, because of this specific part. Because otherwise, what tends to happen is it just kind of looks like an overlay. It doesn't really fit in. And after we do this, we're going to have to go back again still and really work in the highlights back into these photo textures, okay? So this one is just elephant skin that I found. And it's definitely going to take you some time. You just have to go over this whole image like this. Actually, sorry, let me correct that. Not the whole image, and I'll explain why in a second. But let's go ahead and place that down and adjust the opacity some more. And the exposure a little bit more. Okay. And then I think that looks about good. Let's go ahead and get our eraser tool and clean up these edges. So, like I said, the reason that we aren't going to do the entire image is because by the time we're done, we're going to use some photo effects to make it look like this is kind of out of focus in some areas with a little bit of a depth of field like you might have in a photograph of something that's taken very close up. And so because of that, we're not going to spend a bunch of time on every single area because a lot of it is going to be blurred and out of focus. So we're going to focus on the areas that are our main focal point. So that's going to be mostly the front half of his body, and especially his face area is where we're really going to make sure we get these textures in here and that they look good. Okay, so there's our next layer. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We're going to do some areas on his jaw. So I think I'm going to go with this one for his jaw area. So we will get our lasso tool here. Grab that, bring it into our image, drop it in right there. Okay, now we can go ahead and rotate this so it fits more with the area and shape that we want. Okay, we're gonna bring the opacity down as normal. Excellent. Come up here for this one. Let's go ahead and place that. All right, so for this one, we're going to also need to adjust the hue and saturation because we don't want it to, we'll turn it to more green, which is where we're at, and then just bring down the saturation so it's not competing as much. Then we're gonna come back to our adjustments. We're gonna go to the exposure again, bring up the gamma and the exposure just a little bit. Okay. And let's bring up the opacity just a little bit more as well. Okay. And bring up the exposure just a tiny bit. Okay. Go ahead and get our warp tool, which is under edit, transform, and warp. I know that I'm going a little bit fast on this, but since I'm doing it a whole bunch, I don't want to take too long. So hopefully I'm going to be doing it a bunch of times, so you'll pick up on it as I do. You'll get the hang of what I'm doing here. So go ahead and adjust this to fit. Blow this side up back here. So I want those scales to get pretty big. They'll get a bit smaller right along that bottom there. Okay. All right, let's give that a shot and see if we can get that to look good. So go ahead and get our eraser tool, and we'll blow that up a little bit. Oops, that's the wrong tool. Let's go ahead and do that. And we want, there we go, there's our eraser tool. Go along the bottom there. And then up here as well. Okay, and then I'm gonna bring the opacity down just a little bit more. And we'll adjust the exposure one more time. We're gonna bring the gamma up, so it's just a bit darker in those crevices. There we go. Perfect. And then on, let's see, this layer, I'm gonna lower the opacity on that just a little bit as well. It's coming in a little bit too strong. Right about there looks good. All right. Excellent. Let's move on to some more areas on the front of his face. We're gonna try, let's go with this piece here. I think looks good. And we're gonna go ahead and select our lasso tool. I'm gonna go with this area right up here. Okay, we'll drag that over. If we can get it to select up here. Okay. Rotate that. There we go. Let's bring that opacity down. Okay. Place that. Image, adjustments, exposure. Bring that gamma up. And the exposure. There's not a set number or, spot you need to do this to, but it's kind of something you have to do by eye and, just see what looks good through sort of trial and error. Okay. Go ahead and we're gonna bring down the saturation so we're not competing with our previous colors. And let's go ahead and get that transform, edit, transform, warp. All right, we'll go ahead and place that. Grab our eraser. And we're just gonna go ahead and repeat this process over the entire thing. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and speed it up so you don't have to just sit here and watch the whole thing. But yeah, when we get to the horns, I'll go ahead and stop and we'll show you what we're gonna do with that. So enjoy. All right, so before we go too much further, let's go ahead and do these horns, okay? Now, I'm actually going to just use these horns here because, well, they already look perfect and they're exactly what we need. And we will paint over them after we place them, but for now, this is gonna be a lot faster than having to paint all these ridges, okay? This is a technique that's called photo bashing, and this isn't really hardcore 100% photo bashing since we painted almost the whole thing. We're only using a little bit of it, but this is a technique that's pretty common, especially in concept art and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and make sure we have this placed around where we want it. Okay. And for now, I'm going to lower the opacity so we can see a little bit better what we're doing. And then I'm going to hit our transform tool. And we are going to put this in where we want it to be. So, let's see if that's too warped. That looks not too bad. Let's go with that. Go ahead and get our eraser. And once again, I'm not super worried about these end details here because this is going to be out of focus, the tip of the horn here. And then we're going to go ahead and come down here to this layer so that we can erase out that horn that's there underneath, the original one. And come back up here. Let's find our, there we go. All right, there we go. And we're going to be able to come back in and paint into this more so it doesn't quite look so fake. Okay, and we're gonna actually have to do that with all of these textures, but I just want to point that out because I'm aware that it looks a little weird right now, but that's okay. So let's do the bottom horn. I'm going to use this one here. Okay, lower the opacity on that guy as well just a bit. Okay, get our eraser tool. All right, so there we go. That looks good enough for the textures. Like I said, we'll be able to come back in and adjust it. I do want to fix just a few more spots over here on his face. And then, what's that layer? We want this layer. Some areas here that I need to pull back just a bit as well. There we go. Okay. Excellent. Let's go ahead and move on to this arm over here. So I'm gonna go with we actually have some wrinkles that we can work with. So let's go with this area here. I'll use these for the wrinkles on his arm. All right, we're gonna take this same selection here that we already used and we're gonna use it again on his arm here, but it's gonna be a bit smaller this time. So looking at these, I decided it's going to be a little bit harder to get it to fit the value range as everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and delete them, and we're going to redo the horns here in a minute. But it's really important that when you're doing photo textures that you really take the time and effort to make sure that nothing looks like it's sticking out blatantly, right? Everything needs to really sort of blend into one coherent piece. And if there's one spot that really stands out more than the rest, it can really destroy the illusion of the whole image. So I took that part out, and we're gonna have to go back and do it again. But first, we're gonna just finish up a few more parts here. I'm gonna do a few areas on his feet, and then we're gonna do the log, and we'll finish up with the horns last. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish up the feet area. You'd be surprised what you can use to texture things. All right, now let's go ahead and add. Let's go ahead and add the bark, the tree bark, and I got a couple pieces here. Oh, and I forgot we have this guy. We might go back and use some of him some more somewhere. We'll see. But yeah, let's go with the bark. We got these two here to work with. So I'm just gonna come in here and grab a section. All right, so that looks pretty good for the log. And I'm gonna just lower the opacity on it a little bit more. Okay. And now let's see if we can get these horns right again. Let's try, let's see, what angle are we getting these at? We have these horns, or these ones. That's a little bit more accurate to the angle that we have, and that's what we have to work with, it looks like. So the only problem is that those are really bright and blown out. Those are pretty bright too though. Let's try it. Let's try this and see what we can make happen. You know what? No, I can already tell we're gonna have to go with these ones. And if we really can't get it to work for some reason, that's not a big deal. We can always just paint it ourselves. So let's at least give it a crack. All right, so I'm gonna start with the bottom one this time. Now the first thing that we're gonna need to do, and maybe we just want one horn. Now that'll make it look like he has like a weird nose. We don't want that. So what we're gonna need to do is, first off, let's actually go ahead and clean up the edges a little bit more. Okay, so come in here, go ahead and grab our lasso tool. And do our best. Let's use our magnetic lasso tool. So if you hold down the lasso tool, you'll be able to select magnetic, and this will just follow along the edge of whatever it is you're trying to select, which makes it a lot easier. And if you ever need to place a point, you can just click and it will put an anchor down for you. All right, here we go. And we're gonna inverse, oops, not that. We want to inverse our selection. So Shift Command I will inverse that for you. Did it work? Let's find out. Doesn't look like it did. Nope. Shift Command I. There we go. All right, and then we can go ahead and just erase away the rest of that, or I believe just hit delete. There we go. So now we can unselect that, and that will give us just our horn. Now, the problem is that it's way too bright. So we're gonna come down here to brightness and contrast. Go lower the brightness some. Keep the contrast not too crazy. Okay. And we're gonna need to adjust the curves here. So we're gonna make it so our darks aren't quite so dark, and that our lights are a little bit darker so they're not quite so bright. And that should help it fit in a lot more. Now we want to do a warp because we want this to be a little bit straighter here. And then let's go ahead with, I'm gonna select perspective warp, I believe is what we want. Nope. We want free transform, there we go. And that should allow us to, all right, there we go. So if you hold Command, you can do this, which will allow you to sort of freely move it around, which will help us be able to get it at right the angle we want, which is about like that, I think. Maybe a little bit more, a little lower, perhaps. There we go. Excellent, okay. Now let's do the other horn. I want to see what this looks like, so let's get off of this layer. And we'll go ahead and zoom out here for a second. All right, so that's definitely fitting in with our values more. And I'm just going to duplicate it, and we'll scale it up just a little bit, and we'll just have two of them like that. Okay, and we'll be able to go in and adjust you know, some small paint details and stuff so it looks not quite like a copy. Okay, all right, perfect. Now we can take our eraser tool and soften up the edges a bit. And then on the horn layer, let's go to our original layer. We can get rid of the remnants of the original horn. Okay. Let's go ahead and zoom out, make sure that's looking good. Okay. Awesome. And then something else we can do here is, let's go back to our horn layer, we want to adjust the hue and saturation so that it matches up a little better with the rest of what we got going on. Excellent. So that, I'm doing one more quick pass over to make sure we got everything, but I think that looks about good for our texture layer. Okay, so now we still have a little bit ways to go before this thing is complete. We're gonna have to go back into Procreate and work all of this together to make sure that it fits as one cohesive image instead of kind of this monster mash of other layers. So I need to select all of these. Okay, and we're gonna go ahead and merge them down. And that should put all of our textures on one layer. And then we can do one final adjustment on everything to make sure it's all working cohesively. And we're gonna do one more gamma check here. All right. Perfect. All right, so now we're ready to take it back into Procreate and work on the next part. So if you'd like, you can export this as a Photoshop document or as a JPEG. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Just know that it will be compressed from this point on. So that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next.